Well, good evening, this is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on the 17th of May. And Emmanuel Macron has had a face-to-face with Mark Zuckerberg over internet security, fake news and hate speech and so on and so forth. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has warned media giants and platforms that if they don't start reining in hate speech and fake news and so on and so forth, there will be serious financial consequences. And I think that this is a very dangerous escalation. And that is the topic for this evening. And a very warm welcome to all of you returning to my channel, and a big shout out to any new visitors this evening. Please make yourself comfortable, and we are going to discuss this very important issue. And why is it important? Well, let me first read. This is a book I've had for a long time. It's called The End of America. It's by Naomi Wolf. It is a brilliant treatise. And it gets into the checklist of 10 things that every dictator needs to take over a country. This information has basically been learned and built upon over the years, you know, by Hitler, Mussolini, Napoleon, Pol Pot, you know, all of the big dictators who took over countries, and it is a working list that's evolved. And they basically got it down pat. Now, I'm going to let you be the judge of how far along this list we have come, but we've actually come quite a way. So, one is invoke an external and internal threat. Well, we have that with terrorism externally and terrorism internally, now homegrown terrorism. 2, establish secret prisons. Well, there are lots of secret prisons throughout the world. The special rendition program is still in progress, and as far as I know, no one really talks about that too much anymore, but you know, Guantanamo's kind of closed down, and everyone's kind of you know, gone to sleep about this now. But I think that, you know, this is still going on, where they take prisoners to special places in countries overseas, you know, where they're outside of the law. 3, develop a paramilitary force. Well, we have all kinds of contractors now that were working in Iraq. These are private sort of quasi-government organizations who act outside of the law, but often work for and on behalf of the government. 4, surveil ordinary citizens. Well, we've already got that on. We've got CCTV just about everywhere now, and of course we're being surveilled on the internet, and that's what we're talking about with Facebook here and these social media giants. 5, infiltrate citizens groups. 6, arbitrarily detain and release citizens. 7, target key individuals. Well, we've been seeing that with the deplatforming of people on the internet, on YouTube and Twitter and so on and so forth. Restrict the press. And that's what's going on too with Facebook and the government getting involved with the censoring through these social media giants. 9, cast criticism as espionage and dissent as treason. And 10, subvert the rule of law. Well, we can all see that there are people getting away with blue murder, as in SNC Lavalin, and certainly some of these larger petrochemical companies that are getting away with all kinds of egregious acts overseas in other countries. So now this comes under surveillance of the public, but what our governments now seem to want to do is to basically start overseeing all of these social media platforms and regulating speech. And of course, you know, we know that it will not take too long for it to become biased to whatever party is in control of that particular situation. And of course, you know, now I'm going to flip over to George Orwell here in 1984, because that's what it's feeling like right now to me. And we're going to go through one or two things that are quite Orwellian, and why what is happening now is eerily similar to what happened in George Orwell's very prophetic novel, 1984. So 1984, often published as 1984, is a dystopian novel by the English writer George Orwell, published in June 1949, whose themes centre on the risks of government overreach, totalitarianism and repressive regimentation of all persons and behaviours within society. The novel is set in an imagined future, the year 1984, when much of the world has fallen victim to perpetual war, omnipresent government surveillance and propaganda. In the novel, Great Britain, Airstrip 1, has become a province of a superstate named Oceania, which is ruled by the party who employ the thought police to persecute individualism and independent thinking. Okay, we're paying attention here? The party's leader is Big Brother, who enjoys an intense cult of personality, even though he may not even exist. The protagonist of the novel, Winston Smith, is a rank-and-file party member. Smith is an outwardly diligent and skillful worker, but he secretly hates the party and dreams of rebellion against Big Brother. Smith rebels by entering a forbidden relationship with co-worker Julia. Why was Newspeak important in 1984? To control thought, political correctness is the latest dialect of Newspeak. With each new edition of the Newspeak dictionary, words were cut or shortened, and was the only dictionary to eliminate words instead of adding them. The goal was to control thoughts by making it so people couldn't verbalize their own thoughts. It's hard to when you don't have the vocabulary, and of course they made it illegal. The words that weren't in Newspeak dictionary were wrong think, wrong speak, and don't we have that today? And so here are some of the words from Newspeak. Ingsoc, English socialism. Good sex, sex for the sole purpose of creating offspring and without pleasure. Sex crime, technically all other forms of sex, but it is basically sex for the purpose of pleasure. Artsem, artificial insemination. Crimethink, the Newspeak word for thought crime. Doublethink, believing two contradictory terms to be correct. Face crime, a facial expression that one makes which could indicate thought crime. Old thinkers unbelly ingsoc. Very roughly, those words were formed before the revolution cannot have full emotional understanding of English socialism. But as all noted, even the wordy Old Speak translation is not adequate at all. The word old thinkers has all sorts of bad connotations. These are to be regarded as wicked, decadent, useless people because their minds were not soaked in ingsoc from childhood. And it's interesting that during Brexit, people were called backward thinkers if they wanted to separate from the EU. Bellyfeel is a blind, enthusiastic acceptance by which you know, in your belly as it were, just how awesomely great ingsoc is. No need to analyse anything rationally, it is swallowed whole, accepted without thought, while you can barely believe how blessed you are that you get to hear the sublime wisdom of Big Brother. And ingsoc, technically English socialism, is not just any ideology. To its adherents, it is like the leading principle of all existence, the doctrine of all that is good and great and wholesome in the world. Anyway, let's go and take a look at a couple of these stories that I found out, and then we'll come back and I'll do a quick wrap-up. Okie dokie, here we go. Okay, CBC News. Trudeau warns of meaningful financial consequences for social media giants that don't combat hate speech. A new digital charter will dictate how the country will combat hate speech, misinformation and online electoral interference in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told a technology conference in Paris on Thursday. Trudeau made the announcement at the Viva Tech conference, an international summit that brings together startups and technology leaders. The announcement was short on details which Trudeau says will be revealed in various announcements over the coming weeks, but he warned there will be hefty penalties for social media companies that don't clamp down. Short on details, huh? The platforms are failing their users and they're failing our citizens, he said. They have to step up in a major way to counter disinformation, and if they don't, we will hold them to account, and there will be meaningful financial consequences. News France, Facebook Zuckerberg discusses hate speech with Macron, and there they are, at the Elysee Palace. All nice and cozy. Paris, France, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg joined French President Emmanuel Macron at the Elysee Palace on Friday to discuss the French government's plans to take a more active role in policing harmful content posted on the world's third most visited website. While Macron has been seeking more strict state control over social networks across the European Union, Facebook and French authorities have piloted a system of co-regulation. Preliminary findings of the trial system released before Friday's meeting suggest French officials did not trust Facebook to regulate itself alone and recommended the government continue to work with the network to remove dangerous material. the inadequacy and lack of credibility in the self-regulatory approach adopted by the largest platforms justify public intervention to make them more responsible, the report said. So there you go. They want to control your speech. They're going to decide what is hate speech and what is not, and we all know that any criticism of Macron is going to be considered hate speech, or Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, it'll be the same thing. And I'm not just criticising the Liberal side of things, they are all going to take advantage of this situation, because these people are working hand in glove, and that's the mistake we're making. That's the mistake we're making, is not realising that there are people on the left and the right who are cooking up this deal. So I wanted to go through the George Orwell stuff, because this is who is going to be the arbiter of fake news. This is the person, and his government are going to decide what is fake, what is hate, what is bullying. So to understand what he is going to be like, well, let's look at his attitude towards truth. Trudeau's lineup of willing op-ed writers points to a larger problem of media manipulation. One of the most revelatory bombshells from former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould's candid and damaging testimony was when she alleged that the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, offered to get the minister's positive press if she were to follow Trudeau's government's wishes. According to Wilson-Raybould, Telford told her Chief of Staff that the Prime Minister's office could line up all kinds of people to write op-eds to defend her for allowing SNC-Lavalin to get off virtually scot-free for bribery charges. So what they're saying here is they can actually create fake news. They're going to create fake news. Now this is the person who's going to tell you what fake news is. This is from Global News Commentary, the facts about what Justin Trudeau can't remember. And so this was a situation. Trudeau says he has no memory of groping a female reporter in Kokanee.
I remember that day in Preston well. It was a foundation, Avalanche Foundation event to support avalanche safety. I had a good day that day. I don't remember any negative interactions that day at all.
So Trudeau is denying it, and of course we now know that it did happen. Fact after fact have come out. The reporter subjected to Trudeau's groping told her then editor and then publisher about the incident. The publisher recalled the reporter being distressed. For his part, the editor said whatever physical touch or whatever had occurred in that moment was definitely not welcome and definitely inappropriate. To dismiss the so-called Kokanee grope, you must dismiss the paper and its reporting, believe it's fake news, ignore the apology attributed to Justin Trudeau, more fake news, ignore the contemporaneous accounts from the editor and the publisher, which are detailed, sourced by multiple outlets and on the record, or simply believe that whatever happened wasn't all that serious and that Trudeau gets to be judge, jury and pardoner when he hasn't afforded that luxury to others in his party facing similar questions about their conduct. Now he finally did admit that something had happened, but then he went on to say that, well, we all know that women experience things differently from men. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is not necessarily to pick on Trudeau about the particular incident itself. It's the way he's responded to the incident. To deny it and to then say that the woman experienced things differently. In other words, she's lying and he's telling the truth. Because he set himself as judge and jury over fake speech and hate speech. Okay, and this is not defined. This is only what Trudeau thinks it is. Okay, or Macron in Paris. Okay, so this is very, very dangerous, what's taking place right here. This is a full text of PSYOP and how it transformed itself into mind war. The impact of even these minor techniques of mind war was remarkable. A psychological climate of inexorable US victory was created and sustained in both the United States and Iraq, which accelerated that victory on the ground. Somewhat less positively, the failure of mind war in this instance to be guided by only the most rigorous principles of truth and ethics has just as inexorably led to a substantial post-victory evaporation of that euphoric climate. Therein lies the Achilles heel of mind war, invoking as it does the most intense emotions and commitments of its audiences. An interesting word. It must deliver the goods as they are judged by the target audience. If the ethical values of those audiences are not respected, if mind war is used only in the service of ulterior motives and objectives, the resulting disintoxication can be socially shattering. Mind war is the deliberate, aggressive convincing of all participants in a war that we will win that war. It is deliberate in that it is a planned, systematic and comprehensive effort involving all levels of activity from the strategic to the tactical. It is aggressive because opinions and attitudes must be actively changed from those antagonistic to us to those supportive of us, and if we are to achieve victory. We will not win if we content ourselves with countering opinions and attitudes instilled by enemy governments. We must reach the people before they resolve to support their armies, and we must reach those armies before our combat troops ever see them on the battlefield. This is the interesting part. Psychological warfare is the coordination and use of all means, including moral and physical, by which the end is attained, other than those of recognized military operations, but including the psychological exploitation of the result of those recognized military actions, which tend to destroy the will of the enemy to achieve victory and to damage his political or economic capacity. So there you go. Anything goes. Now turn that around, where you're using the social media platforms to disinform people, because I think we've seen that it doesn't matter which leader we're talking about, they're the ones that create the fake news, and yet they accuse everyone else of exactly the same thing, and it's just to disorient you. And this is what this is mind war, psychological warfare. It's taking place right now through these platforms, and it's there to break your heart. That's what it's going to do. It's going to destroy your will to fight back, to speak out, to say anything. And I'm afraid I'm just going to have to speak up in the name of truth and freedom of speech. Now, what I really thought was interesting about that was the piece about mind war. To use any and all things possible, moral or physical, to try and change the mind of the enemy. Well, you can see how easily that could be turned upon, whoever. Maybe we are being victims of a mind war run by another country, just by things that go on the internet, or the country in which we reside is creating its own mind war to get you thinking one thing when actually another thing is true, or just basically missing out parts of the truth, so we never really see the full story. And so we can never really make up our minds, just as in 1984, it was the only dictionary that removed words specifically so that people couldn't express their thoughts properly, because saying the wrong word was wrong-think. And you could be arrested, you could go to room 101, which of course I'm going to let you read the book. 1984 is an incredible book, and it's worth reading. Both of them, Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World and George Orwell's 1984. If there are no other books that you read from the past about a dystopian future, those are the two books that you should pick up and take a moment this summer just to go through, because now, with the benefit of hindsight, they really are turning out to be very, very prescient novels indeed. So, and I kind of want to fit in here too a little piece of thinking that I didn't do with my last video about how the computer and the internet has really changed the whole dynamic of things. And it's not just because of music and the way we can interconnect with each other very, very quickly now and spread information, although that is hugely important. We can now see history in real time, and that is an incredible asset. We can actually see history as we're making it. For me to be sitting here in my office making a video, and then in about an hour or an hour and a half's time, I can sit there and actually look at myself and see people who have viewed this video and made comments, and together we've made history in real time. I mean, that is an incredible phenomena, and it's a game changer. And I think this is why a lot of these things that the government is doing are going to fall apart, because we're realizing far too quickly. And of course we all use it, when we don't think of freedom of speech, we just use freedom of speech. But you are really going to notice it when Facebook starts monitoring speech. And we even have new AI from Microsoft, that is going to basically put in politically correct speech into your text for you as you type, so it's more presentable to more people, and this will be a softening of language. And again, this is very Orwellian. In George Orwell's book, they scrubbed news from the past that was incorrect to make it look like there was no incorrect statements coming from the government. And of course, as they say, this is the thin end of the wedge. This is how you begin. You make these little steps, these incremental steps, and we've watched as we have been surveilled through Alexa and Amazon and Google and Microsoft, and all of the things that we do, we're being surveilled upon. And so this is part of how they create a dictatorship. And we should be very concerned about that, because it doesn't matter whether you come from the left or the right, whether you are liberal, conservative, Republican or Democrat, it shouldn't matter. Freedom of speech is so foundational. And even if there is some speech that is offensive, we have to allow that to take place to maintain freedom of speech. And why is freedom of speech so important? It's so important because it's the one right that we use to negotiate all our other rights. And so it's absolutely imperative that we be allowed to speak freely, even if it's offensive. And again, define offensive. Remember Emily Pankhurst chained herself to the gates of Buckingham Palace for women's suffrage. She offended a lot of people in the day. However, without that act and many others over the years, you wouldn't have women's rights as we have them today. And just about all of our rights, in fact, because somebody had to be offensive to somebody else to establish those rights. And so you obtain that through freedom of speech. And to see our freedom of speech getting chipped away and attacked by partisan people who are not worthy. These people wouldn't know truth if it spat them in the face. And I think I proved that through some of the things when people have brought truth to the surface, how they have been treated. And you can judge people by their actions. So I think this is a question that we all need to be asking right now as our elections are coming up. We need to be asking our politicians about this kind of stuff, why they are proceeding this way and what they're going to do to prevent this in future. And because if we lose freedom of speech, we're basically done for. It's over, nada, zip. You're in a full-blown, everyone will be just living in this puppet world where you can't say anything, you can't joke about anything, everyone's offended. It will be just awful for everybody. So we have to, I think, pay attention to this and speak out about it in the way that we can. Speak with our neighbours, speak with our friends, and, as I say, speak with our upcoming politicians in the October election. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you have, please like, comment and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a great evening, and we will talk very, very shortly. Okay, we'll see you now. Take care. Bye.